Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar for performing a remote audit. First and foremost, we hope that you and your families are doing well during these unprecedented times. My name is Chris Parada. I'm a partner in the Commercial Audit Group. I'd first like to give you a little bit of background on why we're here. As you may or may not know, accounting was deemed an essential business by Governor Murphy back in April. Regardless of that designation, for the safety of our clients and employees, we embraced and utilized technology we had in place to continue business as usual in a remote setting. Fast forward to May, as things started to open up in the state, and after much research and deliberation, we invited employees back to our offices in phases. This, of course, came with some very strict guidelines as provided by the CDC, including health screening and maintaining social distancing. We are now at approximately 30% capacity and becoming accustomed to the guidelines that have been established. Clients are permitted to drop off documents. However, for the continued safety of our clients and employees, there are no meetings allowed inside the office. Remote auditing is something that we had done from time to time, so we knew that we had the resources to do it. I'd say that over the past 4 months, we've perfected it on the fly with the majority of our clients who have December 31st year ends. Clearly, we didn't think it was going to be the norm. We were forced to adapt and decided it's a good idea to inform our clients of the process as well. I'd like to introduce some of today's speakers. We have Dan Shaw and Steve Cimino, supervisors at the firm. They'll be discussing the actual process from scheduling remote fieldwork to demonstrating the applications used to transfer documentation all the way through the engagement conclusion. Also, we're joined by Tom Dardanelle, who is a partner in charge of the Commercial Audit Group. Tom will be discussing the PPP, some background information, loan forgiveness, current rules and regulations, as well as the GAAP accounting treatment for these loans. This webinar will be available to all of our clients for whom we perform audits, reviews, compilations, and preparation engagements. The preparation is really geared towards the auditing process, which is all-encompassing. It will be slightly modified for these other engagements. Currently, all of our engagements are scheduled to be performed remotely. However, we understand that at times it may not be possible to exchange documents this way. If this is the case, we can arrange for the physical exchange of documentation. This process will look different depending on the circumstances, but please note that for the protection of all of our clients and employees, the protocol that we've implemented will have to be discussed and agreed to by all parties. With that, I'd like to introduce Dan Shaw, who will present the remote audit process.
Thanks, Chris. As he said, my colleague Steve and I have created a roadmap, I guess, of how we see the remote audit process unfolding for all of our clients this upcoming summer. The goal that we have at the end of the day is to try to keep business as usual for everybody. It's obviously unprecedented times, but we have come up with, I guess, a list of policies and procedures that we feel will help keep the audit moving and get the engagement done in a timely manner. The following items we will talk about have been deemed helpful to keep both the client and our audit team on track to complete the engagement timely. Step one will be to schedule field work with the primary engagement contact. Your engagement contact will reach out to you and try to set up fieldwork dates just like we have done in the past, the only difference being this year will be remote. We'd like to keep it to a similar number of days as we've used in the past. If your engagement requires 3 days of fieldwork or 5 days of fieldwork, we feel that we can keep it to the approximately the same amount of time required. And we feel that setting specific fieldwork dates is important because even though we're not physically there with you to work on the engagement, we want to make sure that both our staff and the client are available to focus on the audit engagement during that time. With that said, my colleague Steve is going to continue with the share file request list that we have.
Thanks, Dan. So we've been using share file request lists to manage document exchanges between our clients for quite some time. Most of you have used it before, but for those who don't, we have a short video.
Nisivoccia is using Share File Request List, which is a secure, HIPAA-compliant file transfer portal. Once your Nisivoccia team member has set up your client-specific request list, you'll be greeted with the following email, letting you know there are transactions that need to be completed. Simply click Complete Task, and the request list will be open. Each item is set up as its own task. To complete a task, simply click on the task. To satisfy each task, you may post a comment or upload files. Once you've selected a file, click Upload. When you are satisfied that the task is complete, you can submit it for review to your Nisivoccia team member. To go back to your press list, simply hit the arrow on the left-hand side. Now you'll see that the status changed from in process to for review. If you wish to have additional assignees added to the request list, your Nisivoccia team member will be happy to add additional assignees to all tasks or specific tasks depending on your needs. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to your Nisivoccia team member and they will be happy to help you.
After the share file request list has been sent out by a Nisivoccia team member, we would like to hold a planning meeting about 1 week before remote audit, the Ring Central. Included in this meeting will be your Nisivoccia team assigned to the engagement. And we would also like to invite all client personnel assisting us to be in the meeting as well. We feel this meeting will give both your team and our team some time to meet and put a face to a name. A few of the items to be discussed during the planning meeting are the timeline for the engagement and the expectation of both yours and ours. Now I'm going to hand it back to Dan, who will walk you through the remote audit fieldwork process.
Thanks, Steve. Now I'm going to talk about the fieldwork process and give you a couple of ideas that we found helpful to help move the process along and keep both ourselves and the client on track to complete the engagement timely. The first item would be to set specific times throughout the fieldwork process to meet with clients to go over open items. For example, I found it helpful to set up an appointment, I guess, in the morning and the afternoon of each day of our fieldwork to have a quick call to go over open items. So what that would entail would be the primary engagement contact would send you, the client, a list of open items, and then call at the set time that we have just to go over the open items and make sure that both the auditors and the client are on the same page. We found this to be very useful to prevent the client becoming, I guess, overwhelmed or bombarded with emails throughout the day. The next item I want to touch on is documentation exchange. We would like to keep all information exchanged through the share file program. We want to do this for a few reasons. The first being it's secure. We want to keep our clients' information safe and secure. And number two, it keeps both parties, both the client and the audit staff on the same page. It's a great resource to use to keep everything organized and consolidated in one area. As we all know, it's easy for information to get lost through an email exchange, and we feel that keeping everything centralized with ShareFile will go a long way to keeping us organized and on top of any open items that we may have. Finally, I want to discuss the audit drop-off guidelines that we have. So there might be some cases where a client may need to drop off information to our office. It may be that the information is just too cumbersome to scan and send electronically. We do have the capability to accept client information in a safe way, and that will be discussed on a case-by-case basis, because at the end of the day, our goal is to use ShareFile for essentially all of the information we need to exchange. The next topic I want to talk about is the engagement conclusion, or the closeout process. So as many of our clients know, we typically have a 2-week review process. I want to stress that the 2-week review process does not begin until we've actually completed all of our engagement procedures. That's not to say that once we're done with field work, we can move the audit right into the engagement review process. There may be a few more open items we have to get through or work through. But we will obviously keep clients informed as to the status of the engagement and once it is into the review process. Once we have issued a draft, we ask that the client approve the draft within 30 days. Once we've received the draft approvals, our admin department will process and send electronic versions of the deliverables at the end of the engagement. That can include financial statements, tax information, or filing packages that may be needed. That concludes the remote audit process. We feel that we have policies in place that will help us achieve our deliverables with our clients. With that said, I'm going to hand it off to Tom, who will be discussing the CARES Act.
Thanks, Dan. Nice job. I appreciate you sharing all that good information on the remote audit. And thank you to Steve for your contributions as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about the CARES Act. First a little historical information. Back on March the 27th, President Trump signed into law the $2 trillion Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security CARES Act. This act contained emergency relief resources for American workers and small businesses. This CARES Act what it did is it authorized under Section 7A of the Small Business Administration and specifically under Section 1102 of the created the Paycheck Protection Program, which we all refer to as PPP. This provided initially up to $350 billion. And was further amended to increase that funding up to $600 billion, potentially forgivable assistance, up to $10 million per applicant to qualified applicants. In order to be qualified, you had to have been in business on February 15th of 2020, and you have had to have had 500 or fewer employees. So on April 3rd, applications began being processed. Folks could then reach out to their local banks and file the appropriate information in order to calculate what your maximum loan amount was. So from that point, the rules and the regulations governing these funds have continued to change, at times on an hourly basis. We here at Nisivoccia have spent countless hours pouring through the various, what I like to call the interim final regulations. I'm not sure what interim final means, but in any event, that's the term they tend to use. At present, we're still awaiting guidance and clarifications on several areas. I have fielded many calls from clients that want to apply for forgiveness early. Our advice at this point, we're still awaiting guidance and we should hold off. Particularly under the forgiveness section of the Act, that's the area that we are waiting for many clarifications with respect to the Act. We are expecting new guidance and FAQs imminently. So the PPP funds did come with certain allowable uses of the funds, and these are there as follows. They're to cover payroll costs, also payments of interest on mortgage obligations that began before February 15th, 2020. February 15th, 2020, that's a critical key date that we should keep in mind. Also, it covered business rent for real or personal property on lease agreements that, again, were in place on or before February 15th of 2020. Utilities were allowable uses, and they are defined under Section 1106, small a5 of the Act for services, again, that began before February 15th of 2020. Additionally, you could cover interest on other debt obligations, again, incurred before February 15th. And then finally, the refinancing of certain SBA Economic Injury Disaster Relief, EIDL funds or loans that were made between January 31st, 2020 and April 3rd of 2020. On June the 5th, the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act was passed, which further relaxed many of the guidelines under the original act. Among these rule changes, it did extend the coverage period from 8 weeks to 24 weeks, and it changed the ratio of the use of funds from 75-25, 75% having to be used for payroll, 25% for those other costs that I just enumerated above. So what it did is it relaxed it from that ratio to 60-40, which made it much easier to achieve loan forgiveness for many small businesses. Now, the Act also extended the deadline to apply for a loan to August 8th. Originally, it expired on June 30th. Again, this coronavirus pandemic seems to be hanging on longer than a lot of folks thought it might. So there's been a lot of pressure on Congress to extend this, and therefore this PPP Flexibility Act was put in place. So again, your maximum loan amount calculated at 2.5 or 2.5 times your average monthly payroll costs as defined by the Act. There are tools available to calculate this amount. I cover this because I know there are still some folks out there that haven't applied for PPP funding, and it's important to know that you can still get in on that if you find yourself in a position needing those funds. As of last Thursday, there were still some banks, certain banks that were accepting loans. For sure, we knew that Wells Fargo, Chase, Bank of America to actually to the end of the month, First Horizon, and then there are some other lending institutions. This Biz to Credit, we understand we're still accepting applications, Fundbox, Lendio, and Cabbage. So one planning point here that I like to talk to my clients about is to document now, if not already done, your need for the PPP money with a clear statement of intent. An example of this may be as simple as, we've determined our need for the money in the future due to the uncertainty of economic business climate. Any borrower, together with its affiliates, receiving PPP loans with an original principal amount of less than $2 million will be deemed to have made the required certification concerning the necessity of the loan request in good faith. Loans up to $2 million and greater will trigger an automatic audit by SBA, so that's just something we need to be aware of. Anybody receiving funds in excess of that $2 million, you want to be sure that you're gathering your information, that you're keeping good accounting and good track of how you're spending those funds, and that it's all going to be supportable when you ultimately go and apply for that loan forgiveness. So just some statistical information. As of July 10th, the following has been reported regarding the Paycheck Protection Program. And I think what you'll see here that there was a total of 4.9 million small business loans made. The total loan amount that's been dispersed out of the funds is $517 billion. The average loan size was $105,000. And the breakdown of how the PPP loan sizes, 67% were below $50,000. To get to 80.7% were below $100,000. 86.6% was below $150,000, and really 0.6% was $2 million and above. It's important to know, again, I mentioned that there's still as of last Thursday, there's still $132 billion in PPP funding available, and the time to apply is by August the 8th. So that's the date that's coming up rather quickly. I would suggest if you have not applied for the PPP funding as of yet, this has got to make it to the top of the pile, and you got to get that done. Okay. So then we get into the loan forgiveness section or process. All right. So now that you've received the money, you do need to keep careful track of how it's being spent over the covered period. This covered period, it begins on the date you receive the proceeds from the lending institution, and then from that time counting out 8 weeks or 24 weeks, depending on the period you select. The 24-week period did come into play when PPPFA, the Flexibility Act, was passed back in July. Keep in mind that if you receive your loan after June 5th, 2020, your covered period is defined as 24 weeks. Prior to June 5th, 2020, you have a choice. You can choose between an 8-week period or a 24-week period. After the conclusion of your covered period, you will apply at that time with your lending institution for loan forgiveness. You will be able to use, there's a form 3508, it's a long form, or 3508EZ. You do have up to 10 months after your covered period to apply for loan forgiveness. 10 months and 1 day disqualifies you from the opportunity to receive forgiveness. So that's something you want to be very careful to monitor and be sure that you don't miss it. You may apply earlier if desired. So here again, a planning point, we believe there's no significant benefit to applying for loan forgiveness early. We are suggesting that best practice is to wait for all the final rules to be disseminated and digested before applying. Again, this is something that it continues to evolve. There are still areas of the PPP rules and regulations that we need further clarification on. There's an issue of full-time equivalents and what all that means. So again, we believe that until all that gets clarified by the regulators, it's a good idea to hold off on applying. And frankly, there is the fact that a lot of the lenders really still aren't ready to accept application for loan forgiveness. And the lenders are also waiting for the final rules and regulations to be clarified before they begin to accept those loan forgiveness applications. Another planning point, you should absolutely check to see whether or not you qualify for the short form. It is a much easier form to complete, as noted by the EZ at the end of the form number, a little humor there, but it certainly, if you can fit into that 3508EZ form, your life will be much simpler. So with that, I did also want to touch upon some of the financial statement reporting that needs to accompany this PPP funding. First of all, we all know that the PPP funding comes, it's a loan, considered a loan until it's forgiven. And as such, it does accrue interest. Interest is being charged at 1%. That 1% begins on the date of loan disbursement. So, for those of you that are charged with financial statement preparation and reporting, you want to make sure that you're accruing that interest at 1%. There is no need to impute any additional interest to bring it up to a fair market interest rate. The accounting standards have specifically addressed government interest and have excluded it from the standard which requires you to impute fair market interest rates. The PPP funds also need to reside on your balance sheet as a liability until loan forgiveness is received by the bank. We believe this is a conservative approach. It'll eliminate the need for potential financial statement revisions in a future period. Not-for-profits, for those of you on the call that are representing our not-for-profit family, if you will, should record that PPP fund as a refundable advance in the liability section of your financial statements, utilizing the grant model, which is prescribed under Accounting Standard Codification 958. Profit-making concerns, you're going to record that debt utilizing either the debt model or the gain contingency model. So with respect to that, once that loan is forgiven, you as a not-for-profit will record that liability, or reclass that liability to contribution. As a for-profit concern, that'll either be loan forgiveness or a gain contingency recording. Some rumors being heard on the Hill. There is some discussion happening at the congressional level for an automated forgiveness feature for these PPP amounts. That would occur under a certain loan threshold. So anybody under a certain number, I don't know, maybe, and again, just using an example, anybody under 150, you're automatically going to be forgiven. Again, that's something that needs to be hammered out to figure out what that threshold is going to be. But again, it's something that's being talked about up on the Hill. There is bipartisan support among our elected leaders to make costs deductible. Currently, the IRS has taken the position that the loan forgiveness is not taxable, and the costs covered by the PPP funding are also not deductible, thereby making the effect of the PPP amounts tax neutral. This was not the original intent of Congress, and I think here, one of the hidden benefits is the fact that IRS came out early with their position on this. What that does provide is it gives Congress an opportunity to tighten up the language, and indeed, if that is their intent, to make this a tax-free distribution of funds, that can happen. Additionally, Congress is talking about Phase 4, which is created by the need for additional economic stimulus. There's pressure being created on Congress to act, and they are talking about establishing a PPP2. It's widely anticipated that there will be substantially more hurdles to clear in order to be eligible for those funds. I will tell you that there is much political wrangling going on in our legislative branches of government, and these two items are currently perceived to being utilized as bargaining chips. So there's no resolution yet on that. Please stay tuned, and we will be sending out future email blasts, as this information does become available to those of you who are signed up to receive those. So with that, I think that pretty much clears what topics I wanted to cover with respect to the CARES Act, and more specifically the PPP funding. I will then turn this back over to Chris Parada. Thank you.
Tom, thank you so much for that valuable information. It's really good to stay up to date on what's happening, and I think the accounting treatment especially is something that at least our clients who are in the process of preparing financial statements are thinking about. So again, thank you for that. Dan and Steve, I'd also like to thank you both for participating on today's call. You guys have done kind of led the charge when it comes to remote auditing, and I think your demonstration of some of the applications would be valuable. For those of you participating on the call and listening in, please feel free to reach out to your primary contact here at the firm. Everybody on the audit team has been involved in this process and is available to answer questions, as well as anything related to the PPP. We've all been pretty well versed in that, so again, don't hesitate to reach out if you do have questions. Lastly, I just want to wish you and your families well through the rest of the summer and as you move into the fall season. Thank you for joining us today.